Hey, my name is Shelley, and welcome to my March wrap-up. So I want to start with a bit of an announcement. Due to personal reasons, I have decided to reduce the amount of videos I release per month. I'm hoping to release at least 4, but it could be up to 2. It depends on what's happening and honestly how much time I have to read and to film videos. So it's all up in the air. I did post a tab on my community tab, kind of doing a poll of what people would prefer, if they would prefer just having weekly wrap-ups or if they preferred monthly wrap-ups with an additional videos every once in a while. And monthly wrap-ups actually won, so I'm listening to the people and I'm going to be doing monthly wrap-ups from now on. For other videos, I'm working on a project right now which I'm extremely excited about, and I hope to have up maybe the second week of April, so look for that when it comes out. So now my shameless self-promotion is out of the way. Let's talk about what I read in March. And I was actually surprised by how much I read. I didn't think I read that much, but now I have a huge pile sitting beside me, and I did. So let's talk about what I read. So the first book that I finished in March was Obsidian Awakening by Sienna Frost. This is a self-published fantasy in a desert setting, which is very, very, in my mind, similar to Game of Thrones, where you're dealing with a bunch of different tribes and different people, and there's like family dynamics, and everybody is plotting against everybody else. It was so good, and just, I loved diving into that world. Although the magic wasn't as dominant in the story as the political intrigue and the plotting and the family drama, I absolutely loved the desert setting and learning about all these amazing cultures. This is a multiple POV story, and one of the POVs is kind of like a slave child almost that was trained as an assassin, and something happens and he's basically sent off and sequestered away to save his life, and he stumbles upon this other tribe because he has the same background as them, so they kind of reluctantly take him in. And in this culture there are like almost, I don't want to say witch people, but there's like people with magical abilities that are basically hunted because they have these magical abilities. And we're following siblings that both have magical abilities, and the one sibling is like the heir to the clan, I guess, and the other one is the daughter. The dynamic between those three characters is just absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved watching them develop. It was just, I loved their relationship. And then we're following another prince from the other, I wouldn't even say it's a tribe, it's more like a society. It's basically like a Roman-inspired kingdom where it's basically consuming all these smaller countries and tribes and making it one big kingdom. So it's got a lot of political intrigue, a lot of culture, a lot of religion. Like I said before, you like Game of Thrones, you want desert setting with a little teeny weeny bit of romance, I recommend this series. The second book that I finished was a buddy read, and that is The Death of the Author by Nadia Okorafor. This is a contemporary fiction with heavy sci-fi elements. I'm trying to remember exactly my concrete thoughts on this because I read this early in the month, but I did remember I really enjoyed a lot of it. I found that the middle part was kind of a slog, and the ending kind of picked up. I feel like the ending kind of didn't really work for a lot of people. I didn't mind it, but a lot of people that I was buddy reading this with really didn't like it. So the ending is kind of divisive, I guess. So this book is about a 30-ish, I think it is, Nigerian African woman living in Chicago, and she is disabled and she's working at a college or a university, and for some reason she gets let go. And she's kind of going through a really low point in her life where she's living back home with her parents. She's, dealing with the fact that like everybody wants her to marry, but she doesn't want to get married. And also the fact that her career is now pretty much done. But she's also an inspiring author. During this horrible time of her life, she starts writing a sci-fi book. And she's not a sci-fi writer, but that is what she starts to write. And this book gets published and picked up, and it explodes. This book becomes so popular that a film gets adapted to it even before the book gets published. So it's just, it's her kind of dealing with this whirlwind of being incredibly famous basically overnight. while we're also following her story, we're also following the Wild Robot story, which is the story that she wrote. And I'm just going to do this. So we're following this story as well. And while we're following Rusted Robots, I just said Wild Robots, it's Rusted Robots. So we're following her story and the story that she wrote. So it's kind of like a dual, it's like two stories in one basically, but they are connected. Although I loved a lot of the story and I absolutely loved learning about Nigeria and the culture and the food, the description of food, oh my goodness. And there was a lot of important conversations of identity and cultural identity, what society expects from us. So that all of those conversations were really great. But I did find that Zulu's character was a little bit difficult to love, and also I found that sometimes the story dragged a little bit. Although I think that it's a really incredible story, I cannot help but talk about how my enjoyment wasn't to the same standard. So this is one of the books that I decided not to rate. Although I didn't love it, I think it's a really interesting book and I do recommend it to a lot of people. The next two books I also talked about in a recent wrap-up, and that is Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare and the sequel, The Rag Picker King. These hefty books, I read one after the other. I absolutely enjoyed it. This is Cassandra Clare's new series, which is an adult fantasy, like high fantasy series, completely separate from her Shadowhunter series. And yeah, I was so pleasantly surprised by how vast and intricate and detailed this world was. There was so much world building done through like the history, there's religion, there's different cultures, there's different like countries. There's a lot of things going on in the background around the story, and I found that that was incredible. This is like a dual POV story, and the first POV is following Cal, who is basically the sword catcher to the prince who is going to be the heir of the kingdom, and basically his job is to be the sword, the shield, and basically his double, I guess, body double, where he basically pretends to be the prince when either the prince is like indisposed or it's a too dangerous situation for the prince to go out in public. So he kind of takes his place and, you know, appeases the people. I loved the relationship between Cal and the prince. I thought it was just so incredibly done. And Cassandra Clare really does an amazing job of building and creating believable relationships between people. Like she does, that's one of her absolute strengths, and this book was no exception to the rule. The second POV is Lynn, and she is a healer in like almost like a slum kind of area of the same city. And she is like a different type of culture. She's basically from a culture that has been pretty much shoved in the slums. They lost their kingdom, they lost their country, and they have no place to live. So they're living in these very not great conditions and basically look as like lower class citizens. But their religion and their culture is so rich with like magic, which I forgot to mention, magic is forbidden. So if you do magic, it's very taboo, but these people, it's part of their religion, so they kind of practice it in secret. Lynn kind of finds herself getting wrapped up in some mysteries. She basically finds herself in the castle and gets wrapped up with Cal and the prince and a secret society. I think if I had to choose between these two, I think I liked the Swordcatcher the most. This has kind of like more of a middle book syndrome where we're kind of setting up, but the end of this one, oh my gosh, I need to read the third book. I hope it comes out next year because that was a cliffhanger that I'm not okay with. I ended up giving both of these 4 stars. They weren't quite 5 stars, but I really did have an amazing time. And they just kind of brought me back to this like nostalgic fun time. If you are hesitant about picking this up because Cassandra Clare is a YA author, I can confirm that this is an adult fantasy for sure, for sure. So loved it, and I'm very excited to continue on the series. The next book that I finished was A Fistful of Charms by Kim Harrison. This is the 4th book in the Hollow series, an urban fantasy series that I began late last year with one of my friends on Discord. And we have slowly been reading the series together. This one, I didn't love. This one was probably, out of all 4 of the Hollow series that I read, I like this one probably the least. Although the story is expanding and is becoming more of a world event as opposed to a small like little event around, people. That was really awkward. Basically, the stakes are getting higher. And I really did like how that was expanded upon. But I have to say that the main character, Rachel, really bothered me. I didn't like how she made her decisions and how she kind of treated people in her life. It just really got under my skin. She made a lot of stupid, selfish decisions. But the ending was really good, and I do enjoy a lot of the characters in it, especially her sidekick Jenks and some of the other people that I just don't want to mention because it's kind of a spoiler, but I do really like the characters in this. But like I mentioned in my recent read wrap-up, the writing is very cozy, almost very detailed, to the point where sometimes it's a little bit too much. Between the elaborate details and Rachel just being really annoying, I'm not as crazy and eager to continue on with the series, but I'm going to give it at least till book 6 because my friend did read, I think, up until that point. So she's going to continue to go on. So I will probably do the same thing as well. So yeah, this is probably going to be a slow buddy read that we're going to read throughout the year. And I think there's like 17 books right now. So I'm probably not going to catch up into the series for like a couple of years. So it's going to be an ongoing project for sure. The last 2 books are probably my favorite of the month, and I honestly don't know which one I like more. I like them both for very different reasons, and I guess I'll just explain it. Second last book I read this month was A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie. So I kind of made a decision to skip 2 of the standalones and jump right into Age of Madness. I talked about this also in my recent wrap-up, that there are reasons why I did this, and the main one was the audiobook became available through my library. I have been waiting on the hold forever, and it finally came in, so I just jumped on it, and I am so happy that I did, because I had an absolute blast with this book. 5 freaking stars. I had high expectations for this book, and I was not disappointed in the least. We are introduced to a bunch of new characters, most of which are children of characters from the previous books. And honestly, they're so good. I'm having like sneezing fits, so I'm sorry if there's a lot of cuts. In my wrap up, I mentioned that my favorite of the new characters is Raker. I absolutely loved her character, but honestly, I love them all. Joe Abercrombie really stepped up his game for this book. This is kind of like based on the Industrial Revolution in England, where we're basically transitioning from the old way into new technology, and the pros and cons of new technology being invented, mainly the con being a lot of people lose their jobs, and the pros being people getting rich and making life easier for other people and getting things done faster. And we're following people from different points we're following people high up into society who are profiting from this change. And we're also following people who are suffering and living among people who are basically dying and can't afford to feed their families because they lost their jobs. And there is a revolution taking place, obviously, because people are mad. I really want to keep going, but unfortunately my library does not have a copy of the audiobook, and I really do prefer listening to the audiobook of this series. Chances are I'm probably going to get it through Audible, so that's where that stands. But yes, 5 stars. And the last book that I finished in the very last day of March was The Daughter of Namara by Laurie Holmes. This is the second book in the Ancestor Saga. This is a self-published book, and I believe it's on KU, so if you're interested, it's there. If you have a KU account, it's free. So I mentioned this briefly in my recent reads update last week, and I love this book. Like, I finished it in a matter of a couple of days, and it did not disappoint. I was so invested in this. Although this is the second book in the series, you can either start from the first book or from the second book, because the first book is kind of more like a prequel, and then this book follows this main character through the next 3 books. But I did read the first book a couple of years ago, but personally speaking, I liked this book better. So if you try the first book and it doesn't work out for you, go to this one because it's completely different setting, different characters. Okay, so what this book is about. This book takes place 40,000 years ago on Earth during the time where the glacial event, the ice age is happening, and we are following humans and other Homo sapien beings. And basically, this kind of reminded me of a prehistoric Avatar, the blue ones. The setup was very, very similar, where you're following kind of like a small group of people who are very connected to the earth. They have certain abilities that are connected to the earth and connected to each other. So they are empathetic, they can heal each other, like almost like Reiki. They basically refuse to kill or eat any animal flesh, so they're basically living off of the earth. They won't even break trees. So these vegan people who are really suffering because of this climate change, because they don't have enough food to feed themselves. And also there is a lot of inbreeding. So because there's a lot of inbreeding, a lot of people are dying, or babies are not being born properly. So their population is shrinking vastly, and they're trying to figure out how to save their people. We are following a main character, Nari, and she's a very naive, kind of annoying character, but honestly, because their tribe is very isolated, it's very understandable why she is so naive about the world, especially since their culture is very superstitious and very heavily built around this religion of basically the sun goddess. And so, like, yeah, it's a very interesting take, because they're very extreme on their thoughts, especially when it comes to the other Homo sapien people. They believe that they're basically the devils, and everything that has happened to them is because of those Homo sapien people. So that's kind of the backdrop. The story starts when Nari comes across a person from her past, and this person is basically her enemy. Certain situations arrive, and basically she ends up keeping him captive, and let's just leave it from there. I really enjoyed how Laurie Holmes examined how humans would act back then, and how they would be superstitious and, coming to terms with a global event that they have no way of understanding and no way of solving. So it was very interesting, and also the different types of culture and the different types of people, and how they kind of, their features, and how her people are very much tree people, so they're very like agile and small, where the other ones are more ground people, so they're more like, they're meat eaters and they're stronger and faster. So it was very interesting how she developed that. Although this book is not perfect and has some flaws that a lot of people will probably find problematic or annoying, but I had such a fun time reading this, and it kind of gave me a nostalgic feel. I don't know why, I don't know how to explain it, but it was just, the way that it was written was very nostalgic. So because of that, I actually jumped into it's like a novella that's like kind of bridges book 2 and 3. So I've already started the novella, and I do plan to pick up the third book very soon. So yeah, highly recommend this. Really do. Okay, we made it all the way to the end of the video. If you want to comment but you don't have anything to say, you can leave a wolf emoji for Namara. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye.